Well, hi, I'm Dick Thompson, and this is my wife, Suzanne, and we have just up front, we've been married not quite 45 years, actually next month in May. And I'm the new pastor for Seasoned Adult Ministry here at Calvary Community. I've been here since October, so I'm still very much learning about the place. But we recognize that today we're talking about our marriage, and it's a joy to share some of that with you today. So Suzanne is going to get us started. So share a little bit about yourself and how we met. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm Suzanne, and I'm married to Dick. We have a daughter and we have a grandson, and we have been in this area for many years. But Calvary as a community to become involved in is fairly new to me, and really looking forward to I'm in the 301 class now, and finding your ministry. And it was part of when they asked if we would do this, I thought, I'm doing it. I want to become part of this church, and that means being willing to be known and in order to know others. And so it's kind of a big place to start, but we want to be known and we want to know others. So after I talked with Sarah, it gave me even more impetus to want to do this. So here we go. So I'm going to start, right?
So you start. How did we meet?
Okay. Well, I had a sense of Dick Thompson. I transferred to UCSB as a junior, and I had become a Christian in young life. I was not churched as a kid. My family of origin is complicated, and my main memory of church as a child was when my dad made a summary decision to leave the church, and I would get mail, "Dear Susie," from the second grade teacher, "We miss you." It's funny, and I think now I thank God for that teacher. It's my main memory of church. So anyway, they were wondering where I had gone, and I got involved with some friends in high school and became a Christian after the girl in front of me turned one day and said, "Do you accept Jesus as your Savior? I don't want you to go to hell." I mean, it was really dramatic because her sister had started in a college group and she was really worried about me. And that started the conversation and got my attention. And we started going to Young Life. And over a period of a couple of years, I became a Christian through Young Life, but still didn't have any sense of what it was like to be a part of a church. So when I went to UCSB, I got involved in InterVarsity, and it was a really important way for me to get to know more people, because when you transfer as a junior to a 4-year college, it's kind of hard to find your place. They don't do all the freshman orientation and all that. So I'm so thankful that somehow, actually, it was 2 girls in the dorm room down the hall who came and knocked on my door and introduced themselves and asked if I would want to come to InterVarsity. And I thank God for them too, because it was extremely important and grounding for me. But in that first year as a junior, people would be talking about different people and they'd say, "Oh yeah, Dick Thompson, he's in the junior abroad program. He's studying in France and he's a leader," and, all this, different things about him. And, so I kind of knew, this guy, Dick Thompson, was coming back the next year. And sure enough, my senior year, he was there and he was interesting, and it seemed like he was maybe going to start dating one of my friends who had come and knocked on my door and invited me to InterVarsity. So it was like, well, I'd go along sometimes and, chat with her and visit him. He had slept through a French exam one day, and we went over to encourage him. But she was kind of like, maybe the person of interest, and I was the person who came along. But that fizzled very early on, and that was a good thing for me. And during that year, one of the complaints among the female students or, participants was the lack of initiative and lack of clarity around having the opportunity to get to know the young men, because dating was already, all the scripts, social scripts for courtship and all of that had long before started to dissolve, and things were really ambiguous. So it would be like, well, you want to hang out and have some coffee, that would be like, what does that mean? So it was all fairly low key. And there were some people who were starting to pair off, if you will. And it's our senior year. And I remember finding Dick to be really kind of a catalyst. He was fun to talk to. He was interesting. He seemed really serious about his faith. I was still really a newbie as a Christian. I was a religious studies major at a secular university, which didn't exactly help me understand the Bible. But it was good. It was really, really challenging and helped me to think about my faith, and drove me to understand my faith in new ways in InterVarsity in that context. Anyway, I can remember vividly, I don't have the greatest memory, but I remember going in an InterVarsity meeting once and kind of like, he was just there talking with people, very social. I was a little bit more of an introvert, which doesn't mean I'm shy or timid, but that I'm not as likely in a group to immediately show up. I like one-on-one and smaller groups, but I remember going over and saying, hey, you said we were going to get together sometime. That hasn't really happened. I don't remember what I said. I said something that I remember feeling comfortable enough because it was kind of in a joking, low-key way. And he goes, well, let's go on a bike ride. I'm like, great. We both had these old jalopy bikes that we rode around campus on. I said, that's great. I love to bike ride. So we planned a bike ride, and our first date was 46 years ago, April 27th.
That's right.
That's how significant it ended up being. And we both acted really athletic, and we weren't. It's very funny looking back. But we rode our bikes on Glen Annie Road. I mean, we went, all day, and we didn't pack any food. It was really poorly conceived and planned by either of us, but it was fun. It was really fun. And that really was catalytic. And, next thing you know, we're jogging on the beach. I couldn't walk for 3 days afterwards.
And neither one of us like to jog.
I've never jogged since. I only jog if I'm frightened and it's night. I want to get to my car. Right. But it's just the kind of stuff you do. But the fact is that within a 6-week period of time, environed around other Christians, and we were about to graduate, and he was going to go to seminary, and I was going to go back to the Bay Area. And this is how steep a learning curve it was for me as an unchurched person. I remember seeing him at the language labs, and, it's getting on toward finals, and, we're enjoying seeing each other more. We're studying a lot in the library. And
I need to add in here that the first time my roommates ever saw me make sure I got to the library when it opened.
Yeah.
In the morning, because I knew I would be there when Suzanne was there.
Yeah.
It was like we were doing dating in the library.
Yeah. Straight A's.
We both 4 out our last quarter at UCSB because of that.
It was great. But I remember seeing him, and he said, well, I'm thinking of going to seminary. And I remember thinking, I didn't know the difference between a priest and a pastor. So I remember thinking, wow, he's such a fun and lively guy, and, really? And it took him a while to figure out what I was thinking. And he's like, no, I'm not going to be a priest. I'm going to be a pastor. So little did I know that, soon after I would be in Pasadena with him on the steep learning curve, and not only understanding what pastoral ministry was, but what seminary was all about. And so we dated those 6 weeks. We were separated for the summer. I wouldn't necessarily encourage people in this direction, but I was living in the Bay Area, and after 6 weeks of dating very intentionally, we were talking about marriage. So I moved to Burbank to be in the region. He was in Pasadena, and we got married in May. So it was quick, and God saw fit to protect us. Because we didn't know nearly enough about ourselves or each other, but we can talk about that later. But he's been really good and gracious. And without the Christian community, we would have gone off the rails at different times. And we were protected and preserved, and maybe a couple of those stories could come out. But that's kind of like from my vantage point.
Yeah, just to build on that, kind of scrolling forward from there. So we were in seminary. We got married. I was 23 and Suzanne was 22 when we were married. So we started out young, and we both basically were kind of putting each other through grad school. Suzanne was working at these jobs, interesting jobs, put it mildly, while I was in seminary. And I squeezed my 3-year seminary career into 5 because I was dragging my feet about whether I really wanted to do this or not. And so we really kind of helped each other get through all the graduate school stuff and help pay for that. And we, the stories are just all common. We didn't have any money. We lived very, very close to the bone, but we did it together. And I think that was a lot of learning right there in how to be married. The early years of our marriage, you could think about our marriage over 45 years. Those early years were very much trying to figure out how to do life and how to do life together. I was interning in churches, so I was working some pretty long hours, and we can maybe come back to this, but I didn't do a real good job of balancing work and family. I really don't think I did well with that at all. But that was some of the things we had to learn and work through. After seminary, then I began to take calls, and the first church was in Redondo Beach. Was there for a very short time, 17 months. Our daughter was born there, and then we moved down to San Diego, where I was an assistant pastor in a church in Point Loma, San Diego, for 4 years. And Suzanne had a whole lot of things going on in her master's degree. We got that done, and she began to work in using that degree in the church where we were both serving. And then we ended up in North County, San Diego, and Rancho Bernardo. I'm going to go fast now, just going through Rancho Bernardo the years as an associate pastor for 8 years. And Julia, our daughter, we have one daughter, she's growing up, and these are the elementary years, and we're learning how to be parents, and how to be how to balance this life of ministry with a family, and then ended up in Westminster Presbyterian Church across the freeway from Calvary for 19 years. I was the senior pastor at Westminster Presbyterian Church. And then we ended up in Florida for 5 years, and we're back here at Calvary. I'm kind of going fast through this, but our journey has been, gone through all kinds of things. And, I kind of don't know where to go with this after this, but
I would say that
what would you say about
one thing? It was the 70s, and I just have 2 particular anecdotes that might be helpful in how much things have changed. And one of them I would say is it was more common for people to marry and then see to some of those latter stages of becoming fully adult. You're an adult.
Right.
The culture treats you as an adult. But there are a lot of milestones now that I think young people have. There are these unspoken new scripts that are like, you need to hit a lot more markers and clear a lot more hurdles and get a lot more situated and a lot more stable. And then you marry. And, I guess arguments can be made on both sides, but there's something about going through some of those latter formational stages of coming into full adulthood in the context of marriage, because it's so formative, and you're more likely to have that formation happen around and with regard to the needs of someone else and not just your own. And also there's a certain sort of, presumption in that, we know how to shape and who we're meant to be. And then when we're fully realized, then we will look for someone who can complement. All kinds of things start to kind of get kicked into motion there. And it kind of changes your malleability, for lack of a better term. But marriage requires malleability, or it gets really brittle. And it's harder to let go of some of those things. I think marrying at whatever age it comes, is fine. God can meet you there, and that's fine. But that's something a lot of our friends were just getting married, and we were, we hadn't ever balanced a checkbook. We didn't care about checkbooks. We were like, we had to figure that out together. Some of those life skills. Anyway.
I think just to build on that, we've used the analogy many times when we're talking with couples getting ready to get married. We've used the analogy of, you've got these two streams that are coming together, and when the two streams come together, there's turbulence for a while downstream. And I think getting married at that stage of life, that like Suzanne was saying, we had to figure things out together. Whereas I think when you get married when you're older, there's more force and current that has to be merged. That I think that actually is in some ways rougher as you've been in your patterns of life for many, many years as an adult. We did it on the other end of the beginning of adulthood, and other folks are doing it when they want to have it all together. But then there's that turbulence of having to figure out how do you put these patterns together. Like Suzanne is saying, I agree. This is arguable. Folks could debate either way about it, but that was our experience.
We, when we got married, we were quite young and somewhat clueless, which was good in some ways. And we were both, I would say, I'll speak mainly for myself, very, very idealistic. That's something I want to come back to a little bit later, something I brought into the marriage that needed to be worked on. I had a lot of preconceptions about things, and I didn't have a lot of self-awareness about sort of my patterns, and, they just seemed normative. This is the way things are, the way things should be. And, so we very early on, we're in this new, fresh marriage. And one of the first things we did was we made a decision that we'd get married in May. And then Dick would go back right away to finish his finals at Fuller. And I would we didn't have our apartment out, we'd just stay with his parents. And then 3 weeks later, we agreed to participate in a full summer trainee program for people who were coming into ministry at a church in Fresno. That was really a beautiful model in a lot of ways, but it required almost 24/7 participation in what they brought young people in, married and single, to this church. And there was a group of lay people committed to their spiritual formation. And part of the task was you lived with a family while you were there, sometimes more than one family. You rotated to different families. You had lots and lots of meetings where you analyzed how you did what you did. You were charged with starting a ministry that you could oversee that summer as part of like a practicum. And we'd been married 3 weeks. And I'm more of a private person, and he had a very specific place to stand in this ministry, and I was like in the helper mode. Well, think about it. This is like in the mid 70s, and a lot of the stuff about, women don't lose yourself in the marriage, and equality of opportunity. There are a lot of these things and a lot of pressures coming on us that you pick up like lint from the culture. And I hadn't done a deep dive yet. I hadn't thought through what all of that meant in terms of biblical marriage. That came slowly and over time, and it was preservative for us. It's why we're still married, I would say. But it put some pressure on this new covenant. And my needs for privacy, his drive, and finding that was kind of tricky. But we then came back to seminary, and there were some helpful communal things that Fuller provided, and living near other young married people going into ministry, that was really helpful. But some of those fault lines began to be evident really early on, like 3 weeks in. That was kind of a lot of weight to put on a new covenant. And then 3 years in, what do we decide to do?
So Yeah. While at Fuller, I became a mission intern, and I spoke French. I speak French, and I studied in France. And so we explored the idea of doing ministry in France. And so I became a mission intern at Fuller Seminary, to a seminary in north of Paris, a little village called Vaux-sur-Seine. And so we went over to explore the possibility of a call to ministry to France in the Reformed Church in France. And so I was taking classes at the seminary. And it come our third wedding anniversary, which is in May 29th.
Explain our living conditions.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, very, very important. We were living in community. We lived in an apartment that was servant quarters, formerly servant quarters, in this large building that had been converted to a seminary. So we had our little bedroom with a masonite thin wall between our room and another couple that were also young marrieds right on the other side of the wall. So like zero privacy.
And a shared bathroom.
And then a shared bathroom, then another newlywed couple right below us.
And all communal dining.
And we had our common area was a hallway outside of our bedroom. So it was very intense, close in, way too close in.
And I
quarters.
didn't speak French.
And Suzanne was learning French rapidly, amazingly rapidly. So we lived in that community for that year.
Money.
So
Sorry.
by the time we get to May, and we had no money once again.
Negative money.
May 29th is coming to the end of that year in France. It was a whole academic year. And come our anniversary, we weren't talking to each other. We did not know what to say to each other. We were just so drained emotionally. I was not reading Suzanne. I was not able to understand what was happening with her. And I think I also probably had a sense that she wasn't reading where I was. And so we got up that morning, beautiful spring morning, and it sounds so romantic in France, and we weren't even hardly talking to each other. So, and our apartment mates, they could all feel it. You're living that close in community. That vibe goes beyond just us. And so Suzanne decided, the best I could come up with is, let's go for a walk. Let's just take a walk. And we left the seminary grounds and went out on the street, and you walk down the street, and most of the houses in France have walls right on the street, so you can't see inside. The yards are all gated and closed. They want their privacy. We're walking down a road, just an asphalt road with nothing to look at, not saying much of anything. And we come by an open gate, very unusually an open gate, and we look through this gate, and here's a beautiful garden, gorgeous spring flowers
that
all
went down
over
to
the place.
Seine River. All the way to the
and there was a house, and there's a garden in the front, and a house, and then there was a woman tending the garden in the front where she could see us, and she could see us admiring her flowers, and she invited us in. She said, "Would you like to see my garden?" And we said, "Yes, thank you. We would love to see your garden for all kinds of reasons."
Change the subject.
100%. And she said, "Would you like to see the rest of my garden? And you have more?" And she walked us around the house to the 4 times the space from the front to the back, led all the way down to the Seine River. She had flowers all over this backyard area. And as she toured us around in her garden, she had her clippers with her, and she would nip samples of her flowers. And she just started giving them to us. "Well, you have to have some of these. Oh, now you have to have some of these. Oh, you must have some of these." And by the time we were done, we thanked her very much for the tour of her garden. And we walked out that gate, back onto that road. And our arms were like this, both of us, carrying flowers. And I think I said, "Well, I think we better head home." And we were walking down the road. And I remember saying, "Just look at us. We're like rose parade floats," and it kind of makes me want to weep even thinking about it. And it's like grace, it's, and we walked into our apartment, and our 2 couples, apartment mates, had set up a table
in the hall,
and they knew we were kind of struggling. And they helped us celebrate our wedding anniversary. And
plum pudding.
We took the flowers and we put them everywhere.
Yeah.
We ran out of vases.
Jars,
we just laid them around.
jars.
We had everything we could put water in. We put
Yeah.
it in. And we put flowers everywhere. And our
They gave us
apartment
gifts.
mates had gotten us gifts, and they cooked this beautiful meal for us. And we sat there and we celebrated. And both of us that night, when Suzanne and I got back alone, we just said, "Wow, wow."
They helped us keep covenant.
So that's a powerful story for us. A reminder that we're graced, and that's what marriage is.
Yeah. And you don't do it alone. It's not meant to be alone. But, and one thing about that woman that's so precious to me, I mean, I can see her white hair, because I love to garden too, and these gloves, and she was a seasoned gardener, and just the joy she took in sharing it with us, and she'll never know. That's the thing we don't know.
Right.
You don't know when you function as angel. Was she a Christian? Who knows? But
when we could cut flowers for somebody else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, whatever that is. And you don't have to know, but she will never, maybe she'll know and we can tell her and thank her. But yeah, that's a powerful image that we have come back to many times after that. And we just didn't have a framework. We didn't have a vocabulary to even think about what was going on in our marriage. And because of the lack of privacy, the communal part was really, really good. We were sitting with students around tables who were like, one guy, Kabuki, he was going to go back and tend his flock of 10,000, in Kenya. Was it Kenya? Congo. Yeah. Sitting around these conversations, it really was a cross section, and many of them were away from their families. And what do they love about seminary? Hot running water. It was really an eye opener for us, and we discerned that was not our call to be missionaries in France. And we came back, and that was clear. But I think a lot of other things got clear for us. And when we did get back, we went right into counseling, and it was friends in seminary said, these patterns are not really healthy. They don't seem to be resolving. Here's the name of a counselor. She's amazing. And so one of the things I would say over the 45 years, we have learned that there are times when you can't get the objectivity you need. And it's really dangerous to go it alone. Marriage is not meant to go alone. And how do you know if your particular kind of conflict or whatever it is you're dealing with and the resolution of it might not be manna for somebody else? It's a communal thing, maybe not to the degree that we did it at the time that we did it. That put an undue strain, I think, and maybe some would say wasn't wise. But we were protected and preserved through it. But we know, and we're not afraid to ask for help. We quickly were disabused. We wrote our own vows. Like I said, we thought we knew what this was all about. And, we didn't. And so we still know when to look for outside sources for help. And, there are times to do it together. And then there are times when you need to know when you need to own something that's you and not about the couple. It's about you. So we haven't been afraid to do that. I would say, when we first got married, again, it was in the mid 70s, early 80s, and there was a lot of encouragement. Again, you pick up ideas when you don't even realize it. It's like lint, and you're picking up ideas from the zeitgeist around you. And it takes effort to kind of think about them and examine them and consider them and decide if that's really something you want to embrace. But there was a lot of talk about your soulmate and realizing your own fulfillment and, to find someone who would be able to help you be, with your goals and your dreams. And that could be defined by anything. It's sort of like whatever that person was into. And there's a lot of idealism in it too, where you think that something that I like to come back to a little bit later too is that I don't think I realized that I looked to marriage as something to complete me. These things that were the things that were lacking, that I wanted, that I needed, that in a sense I might even think I thought were just part of the way it's supposed to be, and maybe even entitled to once I was in that kind of a relationship. And some of that stuff, Dallas Willard has had a huge impact on us, Christian philosopher and theologian. And one of the things that I think about a lot still, but this was certainly true in the early time of our marriage. And since then, reality is what you run into when you're wrong. And so a lot of those conceptions hit reality, and thank goodness, they did, because reality doesn't conform to the ideas that I brought into marriage initially in a large part. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right. Trying to think about how to also think about this, your question. I think also in the early part, and obviously early because we're still one of the things that's very, very clear to both of us is we've been married 45 years because we've cared about our marriage for 45 years. We can never coast. We can never just assume, we've got to keep working at my own growth, my taking responsibility for me, what's happening inside of me. Mm-hmm. I owe that to my partner in life to be able to be able, and this is a challenge for me personally, to be able to articulate what's happening with me. Some folks are maybe men. There's maybe something about men and women here, but I think men maybe have a more difficult time accessing that and articulating that. I think early on, I didn't realize how vitally important that was, but I was certainly observing and experiencing the consequences of hitting that wall in communication with Suzanne. And then after a while of having to do some work, I realized I have got to take responsibility and I've got to go work on this. And I feel like this today, I'm still working on this. I don't feel like I've arrived at all, but I'm still working on this because I know it really matters. And one of the things I would say in addition, so in the middle years, just working on these things together, I think what's happened now more recently in the last years is that, and Suzanne has said this really well, our sense of identity is really kind of settled. We know we're Christ's people. And we have a sense of why we're on the planet. Why am I so emotional? So that our marriage is much more now a partnership. We were, I think, Suzanne said something when we first got, it might be before we got married. I never forgot. She says, she said, we're going to be shoulder to shoulder facing out. We're not going to be this enmeshed. We're going to be this facing out, facing toward what it is that Christ has for us. Those are nice words at the beginning, but over a long time, even decades, it really has become that for us. The one church where I accepted a call, I walked, figuratively speaking, I walked through the front door of the church and Suzanne walked through the back door. She wanted to come in low key. The last call I took as a pastor and this call, I think as well, we both walked through the front door together. Mm-hmm. And that's a change for us in our marriage over the years.
I would just add that when you gave us some questions to kind of just think about how this conversation might go, I wrote one thing down that isn't something that I came to on my own, but has received wisdom. One thing I would highly recommend for anyone interested in marriage is this book by Tim and Kathy Keller called The Meaning of Marriage. Has been extremely helpful to us, and we've walked with young couples going toward marriage using this book as our study. But I would say that those early ideas of marriage that were idealistic, I would call myself a recovering idealist. And I think of myself now as a hopeful realist. That's what I aspire to, which is I'd much rather live in the real realities of who I am and where I need to grow in him and what life is like out here, with the hope that Christ is in us and working through us, than I would trying to make our marriage conform to some preconceived idea. But in terms of where I think we have moved toward by God's grace and working through other people and through his word, you asked us to think about what is the meaning of marriage. And I just wanted to share this. I wrote it down because if I get emotional, I want to be able to say the whole thing. Just that I know it was God's original idea, and that marriage is one of God's strategies, just one. It's not the only strategy for the long, slow work of reciprocal human character formation in the fine texture of daily life, because that's where we really need to rub up against other people and have those edges knocked off and come to light. And its essential purpose is for each person in the marriage to help the other become who God intends them to be. That didn't come into focus for us, with the clarity I wish it had, but it did come into focus. So I'm clearer that, the bond of love, of course, but we had a lot of the ideas from the culture of how that should look and how it should feel, and it was too feelings based, I think. And the idea of love that's been the most freeing and enduring is seeking the good of the other. And feelings are a byproduct of that. And intensity of feelings and the kind of feelings and everything that characterize different stages of marriage, they come and go and they can morph. But if you're seeking the good of the other sincerely, I think you come to love them in a different way. And that's what creates the covenant within which it's safe to be who you really are and to be able to, by the Holy Spirit working through one to the other, we're supposed to become more who we're intended to be. And that's more how I think about it now. That's how it's changed.
I'm going to build on that. The seeking the good of the other, seeking the good of the other, I'm trying to make this concrete. For me, one place where this really lands in seeking the good of Suzanne is me showing up, me listening, me being fully present to Suzanne when she is working something out. She's got Suzanne needs to process. A lot of us are like this. Most of us are like this. We've got to process by dialogue, and the other has got it. In the gift of the seeking the good of the other. The gift is to bring self to that conversation, to listen with the full presence of your person, so that the other person knows, I know I'm being heard. Is an amazing sacrificial. That's an act of self-sacrifice, of setting myself aside to listen, to take in what Suzanne says. It's something I have. I work at this, and I want to add one more thing here that's been so helpful to me, and I just want to share this with folks. One of the reasons it's hard to take in the other is, especially when it's your spouse, is you feel terribly vulnerable. Because this other person knows you so well. Where all the cracks and the crannies and the skeletons and the cobwebs, and she just knows me better than anybody on the planet, and I her. It makes for a tremendous feeling of it could be used, and when that happens, trust is just broken. So that feeling of vulnerability is a powerful thing, and how to deal with that. What I've learned is that if my left hand is me and my right hand is Christ, and I accept Christ in my life, I become this, that nothing can separate me from the love of God. Nothing, not even a difficult conversation. Not even a conversation with my wife where she knows me so well, where I can feel shame. I can feel I have so messed up. And why in the world would you want to be married to me? And when I get into that kind of a space, I'm not helping anybody. But when I remember that this is who I am, that I am loved of God, I am loved of Christ, and nothing is separate. I am a loved person. That empowers me to be in those difficult conversations. See? I can actually think, okay, Lord, it's you and me in this. I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Even when hard things are being said. It's been very important for me in my ability to love my wife, to seek her good.
One of the questions you asked us to think about was, is like, what did you bring into the marriage that complicated it? That's a really good question, I think. And for me, being such a new Christian, not having been formed in a faith community, the issue of identity was really kind of up for grabs. And identity formation is such a part of young adulthood. You know, who am I? Am I defined by my work? Am I defined by, there's so many things we can be at risk for being defined by, our political affiliation, our status, our socioeconomic, our earning power. There, for both men and women, some of them are very much the same, but the culture would like to clamor for getting a claim, I think, on us. And that was just as true for us. And so my identity was not rooted, let's put it that way. I think there was a part of me that was looking to root my identity in marriage. And it's not meant to bear that weight. Because then if it's rocky or it's not what I thought it might be and all these things, then it's like, wow, well, then who am I? And then my jobs, I had I had a lot of trouble with vocational clarity. I wasn't one who came to it quickly, like, some of my friends, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a doctor, it came the vocational clarity, and I would envy that so much because it seemed like, that's their identity. So mine was painful in coming to some kind of clarity. And it never had that quality of I can easily walk into a room and say, well, I'm a neuroscientist, and it never came to that degree of clarity. But a book that I really am being impacted by now, and I'm so excited because Dick said, I want to do this book with you. It's called Healthy Me, Healthy Us. And it's written by Dr. Les and Leslie Parrott, and they're Christian psychologists. And just like Paul in Ephesians, a primary text in Scripture that we've been aspiring to live under for almost 45 years, they've structured this book around Ephesians. And right in the title, if you want to have a healthy relationships, I would say this across the board. If you want to have healthy friendships, work relationships, but for sure a healthy marriage, think about how healthy you are. And they're meaning this in the holistic term. And one of the very first things they say, they have 3 key hallmarks of health. I won't go into all of them, but the first one is to grapple with your sense of significance and where you're deriving it. And they said, apart from a sense of deep personal significance, you will be at risk for spending your life with the compulsion for completion and looking for that significance to be found in something else or someone else, or to be achieved by something. And none of it will be able to deliver what we need, which is a rootedness. And I mean, they've written it really well. I actually remember some of these things, and I'm an underliner and I have to go back and read and reread. But and this is taught so beautifully from the people who preach at this church. The teaching is so wise and so good and so biblically grounded. So you hear this all the time if you're here, but I can't overstate it with regard to relationships and with marriage. And that is that our significance is received, not achieved. And it's not to be found in something else. And I would say a good deal of the turmoil and the challenges that we had, that a lot that I brought, was I wasn't rooted. That was so slow in coming, slow and painful. And it caused a lot of pain for Dick. I think he came to it much earlier than I did. And so he had to endure the effects of a person really kind of just in a process of just seeking that, and never finding the rest. And then in mothering. And that's a danger too, because then what? Then your kids can become almost idols. Then you're at risk for idolatry because anything else is lesser. So grapple with where you're deriving your significance. And I urge you to consider what the Bible says, which is you are significant because He created you, and you are called in whatever relationship you're in, with whatever work you do or don't do, whatever capacities you do or don't have. You have been equipped and gifted to participate in bringing my kingdom here. And there's nothing more enduring. So it's really securing. Yeah, so it took a while for me to get kind of settled. And I would say another of your questions is, how is your marriage different now than it was then? I would say a lot of the turmoil around those issues is much less prevalent. We still have it. It's like, well, that didn't go very well. Or, we're back from Florida now, and I kind of had found my footing with a women's Bible study. I'm new to this church. It's big. But I heard the sermon last week, and they're like, Carolyn and Takeda spoke into it, and Sean, and they're like, and I'm in the 301 class. You have a ministry. Find it. So I'm leaning in there. But my whole significance doesn't depend on it. It gets worked out through it. So there can be disappointments along the way. I'm in conversation with young adults. We have a daughter. We've, walked through seasons of, friends and groups of friends and people being around us. And because we're in the church, we are in ongoing conversation with people, across the spectrum. And we've seen how things have changed. And I've spent a fair amount of time. My background, my training was in human development, and I'm really, really interested in how people grow, and now much more interested in how people grow spiritually. And this whole arena, I ache for the cultural context for people trying to who would desire to marry and are wanting to be prepared for that and navigate the terrain. Terrain has changed a lot. It's a lot harder, and it's a lot more of a marketplace than it used to be for both men and women. And it's harsh. I think it's really harsh. And so I thank God for anyone who can find a context of a faith community where you're reminded you're in more normalized relationships, but, it comes there too. But I would say, following up on this book, Healthy Me, Healthy Us, if you're interested in marrying, find out what it means to be healthy emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. Really, I don't mean come to some point of perfection where it has to be put off so long because you're still working on yourself. But there are some major issues to sort through. And a book like, Healthy Me, Healthy Us, they have all these, very specific exercises you can go through. So one of them is they say, tune into your self-talk. They give you an assessment tool. You log on, you do an assessment tool. And tune into how you view yourself, because that issue of significance is going to come into play there. And if you feel like you're competing with an entire region of people, whether you're male or female, and how the online marketplace, it's an essential tool now. It's not going away, but there are some unique hazards, I would say, to it. And the hazards are the harm it can do to your own sense of yourself. So that would be one. Grapple with identity and significance and being healthy. Another one would be, do not ignore yellow caution flags. Do not ignore red flags. Lean in and really think about it. Trust your gut. And all of us in none of us are our best self all the time. So there are episodic kinds of behavioral things, and there are chronic behavioral things. And I think that's an important distinction. There are some things that are disappointing. There are some patterns or, behavioral things that are discouraging maybe. And then there are some that can be destructive. And that's in any relationship. It's important for us to tune in the workplace and, but do dig there. What are destructive relationship patterns? And then give enough time. Yeah. That's where our story is kind of a cautionary tale, because it's there, but by the grace of God go we. We didn't really, I don't think we gave it enough time. And I don't mean like 5 years, 10. I mean, some of these, there are some things you can do to make the time really count if you're intentional, but you need enough time to be able to see a person over time in a variety of contexts and yourself. And I would say that there's no perfect match. I kind of, one of my hobbies, I love these assessment tools like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the Enneagram, but they're just frameworks for giving a vocabulary for talking about different ways of being. And I think sometimes, and I think this happened for me at different times, where you want to use them to maybe control that outcome and make sure you can assure you're going to get just the right match. And I would say that if you're dating or you're in a relationship with a good person, and by that I mean a person who, is faithful and growing and is basically healthy, and you are too, that any match is going to have strengths and struggles. It'll be just unique to that particular fit or that pattern. I believe God made us with internal patterns, ways of being. Just like there are all different kinds of roses, and they're all different, in all the rest of his creation, there are patterns that can be identified. The danger is to pin people into a box in the pattern and not leave room for them to grow. That's not what it's intended for. It's intended to provide sort of a sense of a low resolution picture, is how, one teacher about the Enneagram and life talks about it. It's kind of a low resolution. It gives you a hint of, Dick's more extroverted, I'm more introverted. That's not about social capacity. That's about energy management. We both like to bring things to closure and make lists and get things done. We don't have sort of the open-ended, more easy going kind of person. That has a strength and a struggle to it. We're both drawn to more, ideas and possibilities and things, and neither of us were very good at some of the more practical, how do you do these things? Strengths and struggles. There were compatibilities, but struggles. That's okay. That can be navigated. So let me take a stab at this. Those are just a few things that I wish someone had told us.
I agree. Amen to everything that Suzanne said. I'm going to take another tack on this. And I want to propose that there is the 8-second rule. The 8-second rule is physical attraction, and there is this attraction, and it's good for about 8 seconds, and it's followed by the 8-minute rule, which is 8 minutes of initial conversation to find out if you're even interested in pursuing this person. Is this person interesting beyond physical attraction? Is this person interesting to you? Followed by the 8-hour rule, which is spending some time together, probably whatever that might look like, a bike ride, whatever it might be, spending some time together, just getting to know each other. That 8-hour rule then has to be followed by an 8-day rule. You get the idea. And I would say an 8-week, an 8-month. Can't go years.
Keep taking soundings. Yeah.
It's just, in other words, not to be in a hurry, and to keep allowing the relationship to grow and deepen. And like Suzanne said so well, pay attention to yellow flags. A sense of, a sense of, I don't feel free with this person. I have a sense that this person is trying to fix me. That's a yellow flag. And you may not know what that's all about, but pay attention to that flag. It may be the signal, I need to kind of, at minimum, slow this thing down, and maybe this relationship needs to end. I just think what Suzanne's saying is right.
Get outside input.
Yeah, and being in a community is a very important part of this as well. Not just doing solo, but just like a robust community like Calvary and in the YA community is a very important part of this as well. Yeah.
I would also say to somebody who had a hope or aspiration to be married, that taking time, it doesn't even mean when we would get together with young couples to study who were actually engaged to be married, and we would go through this book, The Meaning of Marriage, for example. We would make the case. You may not agree with what we're reading here. That's not contingent, but we want to make sure that you've had an opportunity to understand what God intends, what his purposes were, and his guidance for it. And I would encourage you to consider why God put the guidelines down that he did for navigating the terrain of intimate relationships and physical intimacy, and to come to understand that he is not a mean rule giver who just wants to see if we can, pass some kind of impossible test. I really think that the guidelines and the boundaries that he gives are protective, and they're meant to be protective, not restrictive. That any restriction is protective in its aim. And I don't think I really understood that for a really long time. And you rarely hear an account given on what's God's heart. He created us with a certain nature, and he knows us best, and he knows this terrain, the terrain of marriage and the terrain leading up to marriage. So at least give it some deep consideration. Ask lots of questions, argue about it, get with other people who are thinking about it. But at least there are a lot of things on offer, I think, culturally, of what marriage is, what it's about, why it matters, and all these other things. But at least take the time. You'll be doing yourself a huge favor to try to understand what the biblical account is for marriage.
And just to maybe state the obvious, in the beginning of the, maybe in the initial encounter, relationship conversation, to find out if there is a common ground in faith in Christ and trusting Christ. Do you share Christ in common? Mm-hmm. I can't emphasize enough, seeing couples get married where they're not on the same page with regard to their commitment to Christ. And that's hard. It's not impossible, but it's much harder. And if you have Christ as you can say, you confess Christ as your Lord and Savior together, and you worship together, and the community is all shared together, that really facilitates getting through all kinds of things that happen in marriage. So that common ground and just common faith, you share the same faith, is very important. About Suzanne, she's my partner in life. And Suzanne is a beautiful person. I'm very attracted to Suzanne just as a person, physically attracted to her. I think she's a beautiful person. I love how she is a mom, and now she's a Gigi. And my dear wife is a toddler whisperer. She has this amazing wavelength with our grandson who's 4.5 years old. And to watch her create environments, Suzanne has always been a person who cares about the environment that we're in and making it a nurturing, evocative kind of a space. And this has always been true for Suzanne. So she's an artist when it comes to these things, and I take a great joy in that. And with regard to what I would want to share with YA people is, you are so intensely beyond words loved of God. For you to just to know that you hear it all the time here at Calvary, the God loves you in Christ, who died for you and then rose for you and has life in mind for you that begins, your eternal life begins the moment you say yes to Christ. And that is who you are. And this, one more thing, then I'll stop, is our identities in Christ are unclear to us, and that's okay. That's okay, because we don't know who we are, but we can trust him because he knows who we are, and we can live into that. And it'll get clearer to us as we go along, as we roll along. I guess that's been my experience, that I've gotten clearer about who I am, but I don't have it all like nailed, and I'm okay with that because he knows who I am. And just to get on with life, because you can trust him with your identity, and you are beloved of God. That's it for me.
What do you like about this
Yeah.
tall guy?
Yeah, well, right
Yeah,
from
what are you going to say?
No, right from the start. I mean, it was clear in InterVarsity, that there was this, sort of missing person. They were really, well, when Dick Thompson gets back, and he came back, and it's true, there was sort of a gentle but catalytic quality of being around him. It's easy, but it goes someplace. It's going somewhere. And that is very, very attractive. And I was thinking about this a little bit. I was thinking, not in terms of role, but I was thinking, if you were going to say which biblical character first comes to mind with regard to the two of you, I would say I'm kind of like Simon the Zealot, a little less of the zealot now, a little more tempered. And he's like Barnabas, the encourager. And I've been in my family of origin was really complicated. My dad suffered from alcoholism and terrible abuse from his family of origin. It was a big, complicated family. And that's one of the things I brought into the marriage, sort of this hypervigilance, and anxiety that goes with that terrain. And I met Dick and really had never been in conversation, or certainly not in any kind of an extended relationship with a person who extends naturally so much grace. And it took me really, I think, a long time to receive more of that love. And that's part of his role in my life, I now understand, is to help me settle in understanding my eternal significance before God. I know that because of how he treats me. And I woke up maybe 2 years into the marriage. This may be a little bit of an exaggeration. I remember kind of having this realization, like, you wake up, it's kind of like reality is more settling in. And it's like, thank goodness I married a good person. That's one thing I would say, think about, what is a good person? I mean, a lot of things can get worked out with a good person. And I'm so grateful because his goodness has been a big part, and because he's been actively seeking God in his life from the beginning. We have this new phrase in our family. We heard a pastor say it recently about after COVID, their church was going to fumble forward. I said, I love that. We've been fumbling forward from the beginning. So as we celebrate our 45th year coming up in May, we have more permission to fumble forward, but I can trust him. And he has been he's an amazing, gracious husband. He's an amazing, gracious father and grandfather. And the whole world stops when granddad is on the scene, for our grandson. I'm so grateful because we get to see each other in sort of a new role. And and he's fun, and he loves to talk about ideas. When we'd get together to study, we could go into this, little room where we could listen to music and stuff. And I mean, we could not stop talking. There was never an end to the kinds of things that were interesting to us. And that's still true. We love, and now the context is, right now, there's a lot of conversation around Calvary and getting to know it, but what might seasoned adult ministry look like, and how that's our terrain. What does it look like to be faithful in that terrain? There's so much to discover and explore. And I'm very, very grateful that, he came back from France at the right time. And if he had been there his junior year, it might not have been you know, an opportunity for me to get to know him at that very strategic turning point. So I'm very grateful to God.